Welcome to Inside the Thunder. I'm KD Hudnall, and on this show, I go one-on-one with some of the most recognizable names in Marshall athletics history. He was one of the centerpieces of the Herd offensive line in the mid-90s, a four-time All-Southern Conference selection, and a consensus All-American in 1996 to go along with the Jacobs Blocking Award, which is given to the Southern Conference's top offensive lineman. He led Marshall to 3 national championship game appearances in his career, 2 Southern Conference championships, and of course, 1 national championship and an undefeated season in 1996. He compiled a 50-9 record as a player with the Herd, and his 56 consecutive starts were tied for the most all-time at Marshall. He was a Hall of Famer in the class of 2007. Today, we're going inside the Thunder with number 59, Aaron Ferguson. On this episode of Inside the Thunder, I've got perhaps one of the greatest offensive linemen to ever put on the Kelly green and white. I'm going to talk to Aaron Ferguson today. And when I tell you this man has a decorated resume, this man has a decorated resume. But it's not all about the accolades on the field. It's equally about the person that's underneath the helmet. And we're going to get to know all about the story of how Aaron ended up in Huntington. We're going to talk, of course, about this illustrious career and some of the things you and your teammates were able to accomplish. And then a little bit of life after the Herd. I want to get some great stories. I bet you got tons of them in the vault back there. But first, thanks for agreeing to do this and sit down, talk to me, and, you know, bring the fans a little bit closer to Aaron Ferguson.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to be part of it. I've watched a few of your all's podcasts, and it's always a fun time, and I'm glad to be part of it.
I was really thrilled to first have you say, yeah, I want to do it. And the level of excitement that came through was really humbling to me, because I say this a lot. I do not take myself very seriously at all. So it's always quite humbling to me when people are like, yeah, I'd love to do that. I love what you guys are doing, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to galvanize the fan base, right? That's what we're all here doing. We're just trying to push the Herd forward. And guys like you have way bigger role in that than I could ever have. So I'm just appreciative that you're here.
Well, I'm glad you asked me to do it. Appreciate it.
Good. So let's get into some of this great stuff, right? Blountville, Tennessee, Aaron Ferguson in the early 90s, doing what you do from a high school standpoint there. And everybody loves to know, especially in those pre-internet eras, how does a kid from Blountville, Tennessee land on the radar at Marshall and then ultimately end up on campus playing for the Herd?
Well, it took several different pieces of a puzzle to kind of fall in place. I had been recruited by a lot of back in the day 1AA schools.
Yeah.
And I had kind of been leaning toward Furman, and East Tennessee State's right there in my backyard. I really didn't want to go to school that close to home. And so honestly, about a month before signing day, a guy that I went to church with in Bristol, Tennessee, his father owned Charlie's Barbershop, which was in downtown Huntington, right around the corner from the old Glens. And his name is Brent Roswell. And Brent took one of my VHS tapes, mailed it to Charlie. Charlie cut Mickey Matthews' hair, who at the time was the defensive coordinator at Marshall. So Charlie brought the film into work one day. Coach Matthews came in and was getting his hair cut. He said, I want you to promise me that you'll watch this film. And Coach Matthews told me years later, actually, I think it was at John Wade's wedding. And he told me that he took that film back to his office and let it play. Back in the day, you know, our technology was much more limited, but they would play the radio copy as background for our films. And so there was a play that happened during the game. They yelled out my name. He rewound that play, watched the play, and then he said he rewound the whole film and watched me do my thing in high school. And they called me that afternoon and said that Coach Mark Gale was going to be coming from Chattanooga through Kingsport. And he came in town, met with me and my family. They offered me a full scholarship. I talked to Coach Donnan. they invited me that next weekend. It happened to be the next weekend, which was mid January, was the national championship banquet for the 1992 team. And so I came in. Sorry about that. My son's calling me. They brought me in. I came to the banquet, got a chance to listen to what Troy Brown said at the banquet, which was talking about the community and how they accepted him in, and how he just felt like he was part of it from the very beginning through all the way. And he still has a residence here in Huntington. And that kind of is what led me to be where I am. I mean, I committed the next day. That was on a Saturday.
Whoa.
I go into Coach Donnan's office on that Sunday, and I committed. And then less than 2 weeks later, I signed a scholarship to come to Marshall. And I'd been to Huntington one time.
Wow. Now, look, that's probably the most unique recruiting story that I've heard, because that's kind of stuff that you think, okay, this is something you're going to write up and try to stick into a football movie, right? You get the VHS tape to the barber who slides it to the coach who plays it but isn't paying attention, and he hears the name he's supposed to hear. So there's so many little moving parts to this, and had the radio announcer not yelled out Aaron Ferguson, who knows what might have happened, right?
And Coach Matthews, what I was appreciative of was the fact that Charlie told him to promise him to watch it, and he did. He had it playing in his office. He said he was filling out play cards for spring ball practice. So that was just the stars aligned, and honestly, the Lord has blessed me in many ways, and that's one of the ways He blessed me, is by putting all those moving parts into place.
Man, that is truly a wild series of events to have it all play out. That's a cool story. I'm going to tell you, there's been some really unique ways of folks have been recruited or just found their way in this short amount of episodes I've had. That they've been really unique stories, but nothing. I think this is number one. I got to tell you, that's pretty amazing. So you talk about going to the national championship banquet. What a great opportunity just to see exactly what Marshall's all about. Hear one of the greats, Troy Brown, talk. And you say you committed the next day. So you may have given away what my next question was going to be, but I always got, what was that singular moment to where you go, yeah, this is it. Marshall's where it's at. That's where I want to be and supposed to be.
Well, when you pull in town, one of the first things that happened is when we came in on Saturday, because I was playing a winter sport. So we came in on Saturday. We pulled down 20th Street toward 3rd Avenue. My mom and dad are in the front seat. I'm in the back. My dad's driving. We come up to 3rd Avenue, and my dad turns his right blinker on. And as everybody that's the familiar knows, it's a one-way street. The guy behind us got out of the car, came up to my dad's window, knocked on it, and said, "This is a one-way street. Don't turn right." And so my dad was very appreciative, and the guy asked where we were going, and he said he's got a recruit here from Marshall, and we're trying to find the facility building. The guy got back in his car and drove us around the backside of TikTok Tire and came around the corner there and basically led us over to the facility building. And that was really one of the first things that he was excited to meet me, and I was just a high school kid. I wasn't anything part of this community or anything. The green and white fire hydrants, when you change the color of your fire hydrants to the school's colors, that was one of the first things that I noticed. Just the general excitement of downtown Huntington. We went to the pub that night for dinner. The general excitement of all the people that were surrounding that weekend. And it was just crazy how many folks were out on the street. They had a parade. The whole thing was it just felt like home. And Kingsport, Tennessee, which is where I went to high school, is about the same size as Huntington. And it really does look familiar when you're driving through the downtown. It's a rural community. It's a close-knit community, and that's what this is too. And that's one of the reasons that kept me so attracted to stay here too. My wife's family's from here. She went to Sarita Canova High School. And so it just felt like home at that time.
What a thing to hear, right? Because most guys tell me, I got into the facilities and I started seeing everything, and I could see what they were trying to do there. And to hear that it was like the hometown feel stuff initially is is the draw, and then everything football wise just kind of drives the nail in.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks will appreciate hearing it was the fire hydrants, it was the guy giving me directions or driving us to the facilities building and making you feel immediately part of this family that we say we are, because we are.
Absolutely.
Without even being on the roster. You could have just as easily left town and been like, man, I'm not going back to that place, but it's not how we roll in Huntington,
Right.
it's different, and we all know it. And everybody, I say this, I sometimes I'm a broken record, but I say this all the time. Every school in the country sells the word family. We're a family here. But Marshall delivers that, right? They don't just sell it, we deliver it. And I don't think anybody sells it and delivers it like we do.
I agree.
So look, you get on the campus now, you're on a part of the team. It's freshman year, and you're in like this isn't like a lull in like a rebuilding era, right? Marshall's like riding pretty high, fresh off of a national championship game, a national championship in 1992. You come in 93, and you take hold of a starting offensive guard spot as a true freshman. Now, that's something that even today is not easily attained. So that's just kind of rarefied air. What went right there to have that immediate impact?
I think, Brian Roberts was the guard that was starting in front of me, and he was injured. I was a good football player in high school. I could run really well. I wasn't super strong. I never really spent a lot of time in the weight room, but I could always run, and I was kind of naturally strong. Things just like what happened how I got to Marshall, things lined up well for me. I came into camp. I worked my way up to the third place position. Then I worked my way up to the second place position, and I was behind Brian. And the second game of the season, Brian ended up getting injured, rolled his ankle pretty badly in the second game of the year. And so then I got thrust in the second half of that ball game. And I'll never forget being out there, because, when you're a high school kid, you go from being the top dog as a senior to being the low man on the totem pole. And we went in practice, and during practices, Coach Donna would always say to us, we're going to practice so hard that the games are easy. And that was a fact. Our practices were so difficult, and we were playing against the #1 defense in the country. So when you go out there, my first experience on the field, I'll tell you this real quick. My first experience on the field during live practice, there was a middle linebacker named Brian Stump, and he was just a year older than I was. Brian, I pulled out on a screen. He didn't even see me. I'm thinking I'm going to absolutely knock the crap out of him. The very last second, he noticed me, and he turned and exploded through my whole body, knocked me cold. I mean, knocked me cold as a wedge. So I'm down on the ground. I kind of recover, and he is now hovering over top of me. And he's like, he grabs me by the hand, and he says, nice try, and I got back in the huddle. I'm telling you, back then the concussion protocols were non-existent. Thank the Lord. I would have missed a lot of practice and games, but that was your first inclination that you're not quite ready to play this sport. Not at this level, at least. And so the more you do it, just like hitting a baseball at 90 miles an hour, 95 miles an hour, the more you do it, the more you see it, the slower the game becomes. I thought I had kind of caught up to the speed of the game by that second game. But when you go in and it's live action, everything is happening so fast. I remember linebackers just running right past me, and it was like they were just a color blip. I could barely even see them. But then the more you did it, the more comfortable you felt. But I had some incredible support around me too. JD Cyrus, and Chris Deaton, rest in peace, both of those guys. I love those guys, and I miss them a lot. They were the left tackle. They were the tackle beside me and the center beside me. Then on the other guard was Trevor Thomas, who was an incredible football player. He was an offensive lineman who ended up turning into an O-lineman. He came to Marshall as a linebacker. And then we had Kevin McCarty at the other tackle position. So our offensive line was very good. And I was by far the weakest link on that group. But they supported me a lot, and they gave me a lot of encouragement. And, back then, Phil Ratliff was a graduate assistant. And so during the preseason, we would finish with practice and we would go have dinner. And then Phil would come to the dorms, or I would go to his office, and he would spend a tremendous amount of time with me, not only critiquing my technique, but also teaching me the plays. My high school was a team that was 90% run. And to have to learn how to pass protect, learn just how detailed things are when it comes to college football. The technique that our offensive line coach at the time was completely different than what I was taught in high school. So I had to learn a lot really, really fast. But the support that I received from Phil and the other offensive linemen of that group really kind of helped propel me to be ready to be in that starting position. But, you know, it was an injury that helped me get the spot. And I was fortunate enough to keep it for the rest of the time.
Yeah, I'll say it was we're looking at like a Lou Gehrig situation here. Wally Pipp gets the injury, Lou Gehrig's in, and that's a wrap, right? This is what happened. It's a little bit on a smaller scale for the Aaron Ferguson story, but this is the one point I've got to stick out here. It's like you're the second guy on this era of teams, this 92 to 96 type era that I've spoken to. The other guy was Melvin Cunningham, of course, on the other side of the ball, and Melvin said the same daggone thing that you said. It's like we're playing the number one offense in the conference, or the best players in the conference on offense every week, every day in practice. So Saturday, we just went out and had fun because we knew we had already played the best team in the conference.
That's exactly right.
That's never gets old, right? Even though that's before my time as a fan, right? But that never gets old to hear, because those are bricks in a foundation to where we get to enjoy today, right? There was so much that went on during your playing career. I'll get into some of it, right? But it's so like jaw dropping, the stats that come out and the wins and the losses and the games and everything. And when you have moments, you may be surrounded by some of your buddies from that time that you played with, or you just catch yourself in reflection. What do you go to? What do you go to certain games that you think of? Do you go to off the field stuff? What are some of those favorite moments that you immediately go to?
Well, obviously the national championship game in '96 was a standout moment for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the locker room. You know, that's what I miss. That's the kind of stuff that I miss. And when we have reunions, we kind of just get caught right back up in the same old routine. The stories that we have, all the fun that we had, the hard work that went into it. You know, I remember my first start. Coach Selfa was our offensive line coach, and he put a sticker up in my locker of Alex Mash was an offense or a defensive lineman from Georgia Southern that was the strongest person on the planet, it seemed like to me at the time. And they had all of his stats up, how consecutive starts, how many tackles he had per game. And so I get my first start against this guy. And of course, you couldn't drive a 16-penny nail up my tail at that point. I was about to die, you know, thinking I'm freaking out. But then Coach Scott Reese was our strength coach at the time, and he came up to me before the game, like pregame, and he said, "You have nothing to lose." He said, "You've got nothing to lose." He said, "Play fast, play without fear." He just gave me a lot of really good things of encouragement right before the game, right when I needed it. And so you go out there and you're competing against this guy who was an absolute stud. I mean, he was an All-American defensive lineman. And our first pass play, he comes up and he grabs me by the outsides of my shoulder pads and slams his head directly into my face mask. And just another one of those situations. He knocked me flat on my back. And luckily, he stepped on my chest as he was running across me. He ended up tripping and falling and not getting to Todd Donnan. But that's kind of the thing that kind of wakes you up. You know, when you get hit hard like that and you can recover, it kind of gives you a little bit of understanding of how this game is played. And from that point on, I kind of played free. I just kind of threw my body around quite a bit. And, you know, for whatever reason, I ended up getting an Offensive Player of the Game award after that ball game. And so back then, when you got that, you would go to the quarterback club luncheon that was on Wednesdays. You go pick up your plaque, and then after you get the plaque, you get to sit down and have dinner or lunch with people and hang out for a little bit and meet some folks. and they're making you feel all good and everything. And I knew that my head was getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the day went on, and it's already huge. And so then I take my plaque, and I don't know what kind of language we can use on here, but
Whatever you want, buddy.
I'm walking into the facility building, and I'll be daggone if Phil Ratliff isn't standing at the door waiting on me to get there. And he tells me, he said, "You can take that plaque and shove it up your ass." I'm going to tell you, they think you played great. I'm telling you, you did not play very well. And he proceeded to take me down to the film room and showed me all the mistakes that I made in the game. And it's exactly what I needed. You know what I mean? I didn't need to think that I was good. I didn't need to have anybody telling me how good I was. I needed people to keep me grounded and keep me pushing forward toward trying to be a better player every single week and every single play. And he gave me exactly what I needed. And that was, you know, our relationship over the years changed, obviously, from a coach's perspective to then a fellow alumni to then really close friends and family. And our kids grew up together. And, you know, Jenny and my wife, and we are all still very, very close. And Miss Sharon, his mother, is down in Louisa, and we all keep in touch. And so that's kind of the way that the relationship started. It was pretty rough. I mean, he was very, very rough on me, but he knew exactly how to treat me. He knew exactly what I needed.
Yeah, but you're talking about a guy who was an absolute great in his own right, and he probably saw, like, this guy can be just as great. I'm going to lean into that, and I'm going to push him to his limits. And Phil Ratliff's another guy that a lot of the Herd Nation misses, you know, because he was just an infectious guy. Just you couldn't help but love Phil Ratliff.
Yeah,
you know, I didn't even know him personally, but from a distance, it seemed like a guy like, man, he would be a great dude to just sit around and hear stories from. That's what the vibe I got from him. And even I, as a casual, like not even a casual acquaintance, I just knew him as a Herd coach, you know, and a former player. I still love the guy and I miss him. And because guys like that don't come around very often. And when you can have them associated with your program, it just means a whole lot.
That's exactly right. And with the program too, but in your personal life.
Yeah.
You know, that was the thing. We had so many good times outside of Marshall and with our, you know, watching our children grow and doing the things that they're doing now outside of, you know, graduated college, you know, into coaching, like Dylan's coaching down at UNC Charlotte. Haley's living up in New York City. You know, my daughter is in physical therapy school at Marshall. My son's playing football at Gardner-Webb. You know, there's things, and then I have an 8th grader. That was really the only difference. You know, he and I both had a girl first and then had a boy. You know, my wife and I were blessed with another little surprise later on in life, but that was kind of how our lives paralleled because we both got to start as freshmen. We both played all 4 years. Neither one of us got the opportunity to redshirt, which I wish I could have redshirted to finish up with the guys that I started with. But, you know, I would never change anything about my career. It was an incredible time.
Yeah, man. When I say this, I don't mean this lightly, and I'm not just blowing smoke, right? Because I told you when I was preparing for this interview, you got to go back and check some of you want to get the career right. That's what it is. You want to make sure you don't screw it up because you deserve to have everything accurate. And when you start talking about things like a Mount Rushmore of certain positions, Aaron Ferguson's either on that or he's on a super short list, right? And if folks are just like, don't know, then they just haven't looked because it's truly amazing. I'll be honest, I didn't know, right? I didn't know everything until I get back and start looking. You're like, dang, that too, holy crap, that too.
Yeah.
And you've done a fabulous job in this conversation so far of talking about former teammates and things like that. But there's always a part in these shows that I love to just really hit, which is I like for you to tell me some guys that Herd fans won't really know. They weren't those superstar guys like the Mosses and the Cressers, but they came to work every day and they busted their tail every day, and they just for whatever reason just will not get the credit that they fully deserve. But you appreciate the hell out of them. Who are those guys for you?
Well, you know, there's guys that play defense for us, honestly, that when I was a freshman, and one of them happens to be coaching at Marshall right now. You know, Shannon Morrison was a guy that I don't think people really know how great of a football player he was. He was an incredible football mind, um, super hardworking, very, very talented, and a leader, you know, led by example. You got Joe Chirico, who was another safety, incredible football player, hard-nosed, would come up and absolutely knock you in the dirt. I mean, he didn't care to sacrifice his body for the greater good. You got a guy like Scott Smythe, who was another defensive back for us. That, you know, these guys were dominant football players. And, you know, I think Doug Chapman has told the story about him coming in here as a defensive back, and he realized very, very quickly that there were guys over there that he wasn't going to be able to compete with, and he ended up over on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive linemen that we had. I loved going against Billy Lyon. Billy Lyon was one of the best defensive linemen we've ever had at Marshall. Mm-hmm. Incredibly talented, super, super long. But in one-on-one pass rush, I love going against him. I had his number. But there was a guy from Barbersville, that name was Will Edwards, that I never wanted to go against in one-on-one pass rush because he had such good hands. When you threw your hands into his chest, he would grab you by the wrist and throw your hands off to the side, and you were screwed. And there was nothing else you could do about it, you know. And he was just so good at that. John Duncan, a defensive end for us, that guy was an absolute maniac, and he's still a maniac to this day, you know. But those are the guys that I think about that made us so good. Larry McLeod, I know everybody knows who Larry McLeod is. That guy and I would hit each other in 7-on-7s, and he was an absolute rock in the middle for us. Shannon King, another one that was an absolute machine. You know, but people know some of those names. They may not know all those names, but those are the guys that I think about a lot on our defensive side that just made us into really, really good, a really, really good offense, and made us better by, you know, the iron versus iron kind of mentality. We had another defensive back that was a quarterback in high school, Tim Dempsey, another guy. I mean, he ends up breaking his wrist in our spring game. It was a terrible, terrible injury. And but that guy was tough as nails, very, very good, very intelligent football players. And that to me, we learned so much more football back then than kids learn today. We didn't have all these distractions to keep us from sitting down and watching football. Like, we spent our Saturdays and Sundays watching college and NFL. So you pick up a lot of that stuff through osmosis just by paying attention to it and learning it. And we had some extremely intelligent football players back in the day that were good, and we just had guys in front of them sometimes that were a little bit better. You know, Mark Zaban was an incredibly talented quarterback. He comes back from Ohio State, transfers back here, ends up with a knee injury. And then Chad comes in and ends up, you know, we had Larry Harris in 1995. We had Larry Harris, who was from down in Georgia, a multi-threat quarterback, super, super talented, ends up tearing his ACL at the end of a game when he honestly shouldn't even have been in the game. We were ahead by so much. Then you had Mark Zaban come in, starts the next game, ends up starting against Georgia Southern, goes to roll out, tears his meniscus, and then we got to bring in a true freshman that we didn't even know who he was, and it was Chad Pennington. This kid comes in the huddle. I'll never forget it. He comes in the huddle, and at this time I ended up having to play center for 8 ball games that year because we had so many injuries. And so Chad comes into the huddle, clapping his hands, and I was like, dude, just shut up and call the play. You know, he was pissing everybody off. And but he comes in, but that's how he was. He was super enthusiastic, and he extremely confident. Comes up, first play, he checks out of the play call, which was 48 slant. I'll never forget it because Chris Parker was our running back back then. And 48 slant was just an outside toss play, get him out there in the open and let him kind of pick a hole and hit it. And Chad checked out of it because they had a defense out there that was going to stop this play. And he checked out of it to the correct play, mind you. But after after the play was over, I went over to him. I was like, dude, when that play is called, just run the play. Don't check out of that play. Just kind of calm yourself a little bit. But that was the first inclination that I knew this guy knew what he was doing. Number one,
Yeah.
he was always prepared. You know, that's the one thing about football. If you know where to get lined up and you know the plays and you know you're prepared, you'll be pretty good. The physical stuff comes a little bit later on, but the mental side of it. But he was ready to go from the jump. You know, he made some mistakes, but he was ready to go from the get-go.
Yeah, man, what a great laundry list of guys you just ripped off there. And to me, the benefit of that is folks, this younger era of fans potentially, or even folks that are our age that just don't pay attention to that sort of stuff. They hear a guy like you, who they know and who they view as an all-time great, say, these are the guys that helped me get there, man. Pay attention to these guys. They deserve this stuff. And that to me is a microcosm of what I'm trying to do here. It's as much about putting a spotlight on our most recognizable players and alums as it is giving the proper credit to those guys that helped the whole damn machine roll.
Well, one thing too is, you know, I don't think people realize how many folks come in playing defense and end up getting moved to offense and vice versa. Brian Reed was an offensive lineman. He redshirted. He came in the same time I did. And in my freshman class, we had 43 kids in our freshman class come in.
Wow.
So when you have 43 kids, because back in the day in 1AA, there were partial scholarships.
Okay.
Well, Brian was a walk-on. He was a defensive lineman from Capital, a little bit undersized, but that guy had a motor. He was a defensive lineman when he started. Through injuries and other things, he ends up being moved over to the offensive line and started the majority of the games in 95, 96, and 97. And people don't really know that when you come in as a freshman, you have an expectation. I mean, everybody, I wanted to be a defensive lineman in college, but you get here and, you know, now that they've got you, they can move you wherever they want and wherever is best for the team. And I never thought about it that way. I never thought, I don't want to go over to the offensive side. I just wanted to play. I didn't really care where I played. And hell, I was our long snapper, my freshman, I mean, all the way up through. I long snapped for every extra point and field goal for all 4 years that I was here. And I did punts my first couple years. Occasionally, we had Josh Seamster was our long snapper as well. So he took over sophomore through senior year. And but there's so many things that happened back then. I remember Chris Parker scoring a touchdown against Georgia Southern and then running down on kickoff team the very next play and making the tackle. You know what I mean? Like it was a different world back then. We had our best players on the field all the time. You know, he and Glenn Pedro. Glenn Pedro was one of our fullbacks, ended up going to fullback, but he was a tailback. So Glenn Pedro was another guy that I need to mention. He was a extremely talented tailback from New York. He comes down here. He's behind Orlando Hatchett, one of our Hall of Fame running backs. Then the next year, it's him competing against Chris Parker, who was an all-time great. But this guy goes from playing tailback to putting himself into fullback, because back then we had a true fullback position. He played that position, and he was a senior my freshman year. And I never heard a cross word about not playing the position that they were brought there for. You know what I mean? It was just a different time. There was, he may have complained, but he never complained in front of us. He never had an attitude issue. Just so many times you think about guys like that who really made Marshall great. Those were the guys that sacrificed their prime position to go to another position to make us better.
Yeah, that's a great tidbit, man. We really love Glenn. He's embraced, what we do on the Thundercast, and he's a great guy to talk to. I've been blessed to talk to him several times, and we've gotten to know a lot of you guys from these early 90s and mid 90s eras, and the reception that we get is usually really good, because I think, like you said earlier, most people just like to see the word of the herd getting out there in a new way, and we're just really thankful to be able to do that. Look, I got a great question for you, because I know now that you also dabble in the coaching ranks a little bit, right? So this is one that you probably continually preach because you're around these kids that are in that situation. But what advice would you give to your freshman self or your senior in high school self about going through the process and then acclimating?
I would try to strongly encourage this guy to work harder off the field. Um, Not to say that football was easy, but football came naturally to me. I was an athletic person, but I loved it. I loved football. I just didn't like the preparation part of it. I did not work very hard in the weight room. And that's the thing that one of the reasons why I push my kid and our football kids at Spring Valley, I push them so hard in the weight room because I know that if I had been more physically prepared, that I could have had a career that may have gone on beyond college football. Physically, I feel pretty blessed to be in the shape that I'm in. My knees are in pretty good shape. I've got some dinged up things and I've got my own set of problems, but for the most part, I'm in pretty good shape. And I just know that if I had had more off the field preparation, weight room preparation, basically, that I could have maybe gone on. And that's what I want. I want to make sure that these kids know you want to give all you've got. I didn't give all I had. Now, I gave a lot, but I didn't give all that I had looking back on it. And I blamed a lot of people because I didn't get a chance to go on and play in the league because I knew that I was good enough to play in the league, but I didn't deserve it because I didn't work very hard when it came to the off the field and in the weight room preparation. I basically depended on a lot of my physical gifts that I was given by the Lord to do what I was able to do. And don't get me wrong, it was great. I had a great career and I got a lot of positive accolades out of it. But I know that if I had worked harder off the field, that I could have done more,
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that I would go back and change is I would have a little bit more effort off the field. And by a little bit more, I mean a tremendous amount more.
Is that something that you dwell on, or you're just like, I'm good with it? Because, ultimately life has turned out pretty well,
Yeah.
So is that something that you go, man, I really wish I would have hit it harder, or are you kind of content with it where you are right now?
I'm happy. I'm happy with where things are.
Yeah.
I used to, when you first get done playing, there's a severe depression that happens to you when you're done playing ball. I can remember my wife, Heather, and I in my apartment, I bawled like a baby when I knew that it was over. When you don't really think it's over until it is over. And, my last ball game was a great one to end on. We were 1996 national champs, and I was blessed to be part of that team. But you don't really know that it's the end until it is. And it was depressing, and that's one thing that we're trying to do now with our football team is the young kids, we're trying to make sure that they know and mentor them that we have people to depend on. I have people to depend on. I want them to know that they can depend on me when they're done playing. Because when you're done playing, there is an axe that comes down, and the life that you were living before is no longer the life you're living. It's a big time wake up call when that goes on.
So when does that hit for you? Is it like we win the national championship and we're on this big high, and is it after you come down from that it hits you, or is it when the calendar rolls around and it's like it's spring ball time and you're not going to spring ball?
Well, it's not spring ball because I hated that crap. It wasn't spring ball. It was the next season, next fall. Next fall when that went down, it's like that's the wake up call when you're watching people that you love play the sport that you love and you're not out there. There's a severe amount of, honestly, it was a lot of anxiety that I felt going to the games because you had no control over what was happening on the field. So by this time, the following year, I had moved to Baton Rouge, and I ended up flying back to Huntington, picked up Heather, and we drove to Morgantown to go to the WU game in '97. That was very, very hard to watch. We just, all these guys out there, those are my guys, and you're watching them compete. You miss the competition part of it. You miss them, that part of it. But I'm telling you, it's depressing to say the least. It's depressing when that goes down.
But on the flip side of that, Is it obviously it's had to have come with some level of reward and fulfillment that you can be an influence in a different way. Because I've talked to some of our current players that say, you know, when those guys come back around the program and we get to be around those guys and hear them talk, it means something to us. And I paid a compliment to a guy that you're pretty familiar with being in the Spring Valley area, and Owen, and I told him, like, man, you look like you would fit right into that 90s vibe, right? Because he does the crop shirt and he just has the whole aesthetic. He just
Yeah.
looks like he belongs there.
Yeah.
And man, he lit up and said, you don't know how big of a compliment that is. So what does it mean now to be able to be involved in a different way and be viewed in a different way and not just a guy that played?
Yeah, because most of the guys that I coach have no idea that I played. You know, I feel like I get so much more of a reward out of coaching than I ever did out of playing. The reason I feel that way is when you can give a kid instruction and have them take that instruction and be successful with it, there's no higher praise than that. You know, you develop a kid who may have been a little bit ability wise behind the eight ball, and you move them out and you get them on the field and you kind of help develop them. You know, I've been very fortunate. You know, Brad Dingus is our head coach, and he's let me kind of run the strength and conditioning program out there, and I run the weight room. We work out at 6 a.m. You know, 4 days a week during the school year and during the football season. And these kids have embraced that part of it, and it's a lot. It's not easy to do that. You know, I know some of our other schools in the area have kind of started doing that, and that's great. That's what it really takes to make your body last throughout the year. Coaching high school football, coaching youth league football, because Billy Malashevich and I started coaching together at CK Youth Football League in 2008. You know, that's how long ago it's been that I've been coaching. And it is such a big time reward when you see these kids. And now there's these kids that I started coaching back then are now seniors in college. You got Doug Nestor and Grayson Malashevich. You know, those two kids were on that our first Turf Bowl championship team in back in 2009. And we got to play on Marshall's Field and have all those experiences. And you see those kids' faces after they win a big game like that. That is a huge, huge reward. And I want these kids to know that, number one, I care about them. You know, I'm going to push them extremely hard. I'm going to push them that I almost probably the way I felt like I should have been pushed and needed to be pushed in order to make it. So I'm doing that with them. But that all those kids know that I love them, you know, and Owen knows I love him. And the thing about Owen is, and I'll never forget this, J.C. Price, when they were thinking about offering him, J.C. Price said, you know, he may only be a mid to high 4.8 40, but he's that every single play.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how Owen is in practice, in games. I mean, he's not likable whenever he's against you. He's not likable, you know, and that's what you have to have. You know, you want 11 of those guys that can leave everything out there on the field. And that's exactly the kind of guy that I want fighting for me and fighting for our team.
Yeah, I've heard from many people, not just fans, but guys closer to the team that say Owen Porter is the same guy on play number 70 as he is on play number 1, if not even a little bit more, you know, intense on play number 70. And I don't know much about the inner workings of football, right? I mean, I was never a football player. So there's a lot of stuff that I can only speculate on. I wasn't in the huddle like you were. But to have a guy that's like that seems to me like that's not something that rolls around very often, right?
That's exactly right.
Is that something that it's like capturing I'm going to use a bad pun sort of, but is that like lightning in a bottle to a certain degree because those guys light the fire under other guys?
Well, so you have guys that have that level of intensity. It just may not show outward.
Okay.
The guys that show outward, you know a guy named Jason Starkey?
Of course.
Jason Starkey was an absolute maniac, you know, all the time. It didn't matter where we were. He was a maniac. It didn't matter if we were in the club. It didn't matter if we were in the weight room, out on the field. He was an absolute maniac. Girardi Mercer, an absolute maniac all the time. You know, these guys just played extremely hard all the time. But then you have people who are really super quiet, but still played very hard. A guy like John Wade. I mean, John Wade was the best offensive lineman Marshall's ever had. Okay. Without a doubt, the guy could move. He was 6'5", 6'6", over 300 pounds, strong, worked very hard. And that's why he had the career he had in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the guy was an absolute maniac all the time, but you just kind of didn't see it as much because he was a little bit quieter about the maniac part. But you want to try to get those guys. You have to keep a lot of those guys under control because they'll start going and you can't get them back on the rails. You know, I always try to encourage my son to play with controlled chaos. You want to play angry without being mad. And once you get mad, you start to lose control of yourself and also lose focus. You want to be a maniac without being out of control. That's what you want.
Yeah, I could see that. You want to be the race car that just starts in the red, but you don't want to totally redline it, right? You want to be able to harness and focus that energy, but still gain maximum output. I love it, man. I'm having a great time with this conversation. I got to tell you, this is just as I feel like I'm being coached on how to be a better podcaster too. This is not the intent. And, you know, I am definitely not classically trained in this. I just enjoy talking to people. So I try to make my craft a little bit better. And I'm hearing these things. I'm like, I can do that. I can play. I could interview a little bit more free. You know, it's not angry at all, but this is really cool. So what is it that you we've talked a lot about this, but can you sum it up for me in a couple of words or maybe a phrase or something like that that you can encapsulate what it is that you actually miss the most about being an undergrad, being a player at Marshall?
Oh man, I don't know. There's so much. If you had to say one thing, I would say it's the locker room.
Yeah.
The locker room is where all the relationships are built and cultivated. And that's where you kind of see who's got your back. You know, you build all those relationships over the years and you're through the hard work and the struggle, because the struggle is real. You know, it's very, very difficult. There was a time after I stopped playing baseball, I got injured playing baseball at Marshall. And once I was done playing ball, my second semester of that year, when you have idle time, you get super depressed as a college student. You know, it's like I needed to be busy all the time. And, you know, having to have surgery and missing out on the spring, the games and all that kind of stuff, you miss out on it. I went through a pretty deep depression. I turned into a complete idiot. I let my hair grow out. It was awful. It was about 6-8 months worth of hair growth. I looked like an idiot. I kept my head shaved underneath, you know, just terrible. And they happened to put that freaking picture up in the Herd Cafe of my All-American picture. They used that photograph for some reason. They used that picture up, and I got made fun of. People took selfies with it all the time. It marked a terrible, terrible year. But the struggle is what makes it good. You know, the hard times make the good times that much better. And the locker room part of it is where you build these relationships and the support system that you need when your parents aren't around. You know, we had great coaches, but your coaches aren't with you very often. You know, you're with them for a few hours a day. You're with your teammates and your roommates the rest of the time. And I had a great roommate my freshman and sophomore year. His name's Ryan Nichols. He's from Knoxville, Tennessee. We met before we came up here, kind of organized our room, but he was the exact opposite of me. He was super organized, a great studier. He studied really, really well. He was a great student. And, you know, and that's translated into an extremely successful career. He's a State Farm agent down in Knoxville. And, you know, that guy helped me along my way because I was not a good roommate to him. I was messy. I threw my shit everywhere. I wasn't a very good roommate. And he still loves me to this day, despite all of my faults. But that's the thing about it. I want these kids to have half the experience that I had. You know, I'll tell people all the time, you may have gone to a bigger school, but I had a better time and I had a
Mhm.
better career than what you had. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. There's nobody that's had more fun in their 4 or 5 years of college than what this guy has had. And it's translated over to me to a successful life outside of it. You know, I have so many great friends in this area. And I think a lot of the reasons why I try to encourage these young players today to get into the community and to keep your head up when you're walking through town, and don't just interact with your people, interact with the people that you see in the community, shake their hands, introduce yourself. Because two things, you never know when you're going to need a job. You never know when you're going to need help from somebody, and you never know who that person is that can help you. And this mentoring program that we're doing now with big help of Marshall University's academic center and Coach Mike Bartram and Doug Chapman, this mentoring program, I hope, is going to be a huge thing for these players, because it's going to be an opportunity for them to know who we are and kind of see the line of work they may want to go into, and we can help them with their interview. I didn't know how to do an interview. My dad
Yeah.
helped me get ready for an interview, but nobody else from Marshall really helps us once you're done playing ball. So we want to be a resource for those folks if they don't have a resource. And I want them to know that, you know, the camaraderie that they have with their teammates, keep that. You know what I mean? That's one thing I worry about with the transfer portal that you might lose, is you don't have the long-term relationship. I mean, we had a few guys leave, but not very many.
Yeah.
We had a couple guys come in, but not very many. And there's only a couple of those guys that came in and actually took a spot from a person that was already there. So it's a different world these kids live in nowadays. And with social media and all the pressures of that, the one thing I'm so thankful of is that there were not camera phones in the mid-90s, because I would have been, and we would have a lot of us would have been,
Yeah.
beat
Yep.
doo-doo.
I say that all the time too, man. We just kind of fit right in there. This Generation X, that we just slid in and got the beginnings of all the really cool stuff and that these kids are benefiting from now, but we got far fewer of the potential consequences.
Yeah, problems, way
And
fewer problems.
I'm really thankful about that too. But let me get in the mind and let me just ask, let me see if I can figure out just how twisted you might be. Is the thing
Lord.
that you hated the most? You talked about that locker room stuff and the work. This is playful. The thing that you hated the most, is that the thing that you also miss the most now about not playing?
Well, the thing I hated the most was conditioning. You know, I didn't want to do the post game or post practice conditioning stuff that we did. I do miss, you know, now that when my son went into high school and started to get strong, I realized that there may come a day that he tries me, and I'm going to need to be physically prepared to defend myself, you know. And so I started lifting again, and it just shows how underachieving I was as a football player in college, because I got really, really strong and physically changed my body a little bit, you know, moved some things around. And my whole goal was to shake less while I brush my teeth. And so I
That's a great way to put it.
I finally achieved that goal, you know, and I got really strong. And of course, you know, that's the one thing I regret. You know, I miss all the locker room stuff. I don't miss anything to do with conditioning. That was terrible. You know, Coach Bennett came in for my senior year. He came in there in the spring of my senior year, and he got us in incredible shape, to the point that when we had our running tests in the fall of '96, I sprinted every single one of them. I mean, I was in incredible shape. And it's just like studying for a test. Nobody likes to study, but when you do, you feel so much better about the test.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it was for us our senior year. I mean, I felt so good going into that year that I missed out on the opportunity the previous 3 years to really dedicate myself to that physical part of the game. But that is something that I don't miss that at all. I don't miss the conditioning, and I don't miss class. I was done with school. When I was done with school, I was done with school.
Yeah, I can dig that too, man. I hate to say this, but you know, school got in the way of college for me a lot. Yeah, and I was, you know, I'm saying that, of course, a little tongue in cheek, but I had a great time just being a normal college student. I wasn't blessed in the ways that a lot of you guys were to be able to compete at those levels and then achieve at those levels. So I'm always in a little bit of awe about that. You know, I just never was built that way, wasn't wired that way, but is still cool nonetheless. I got here's a couple of more, and then we'll see if how much of your afternoon I can give you back.
Okay.
Being that you are also a coach, I'm sure you use these a lot, but what are some of your favorite coach isms from your coaches that still roll through your head and bring you out of a nice sleep in the middle of the night because, Mickey Matthews is yelling this or Phil is yelling this at you?
Coach Matthews would say to us during warmups, we're going to find out who really wants it today, men. That's what he would say at the beginning of every single practice. And to this day, we still say that to him when we see him. It's one of those things that always sticks in your brain. Don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining. I heard that a lot from Coach Pruitt, or we heard that a lot from Coach Pruitt. That's one of his sayings. There's a few of them that,
not made for the airwaves.
Pretty inappropriate.
So what what are you telling your players? Because dude, you got to have some in your hip pocket to throw out there.
Well, I feel like I've been known to have colorful language at times, and I try not to say those words, but there's things that happen during a game and whatever that I really don't want to say, but they just come out. You know what I mean? I don't really mean for them to come out. But what I appreciate the most about all those things that I can say, the kids, I've built up what I feel like I've built up credit with people, and I built up credit with the kids to the point that they know that when I say something to them, I'm not saying it to them as a person. I'm saying it to the situation as a whole. I had one of the best compliments I've ever gotten is from one of the other coaches. He told me one day, he said, you can make a kid understand exactly how everything they just did was wrong, but you don't make them feel bad about it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I feel like is a blessing that was taught by my parents to me, is they have an ability to correct us without being mean to us. And I think some coaches, and there's a lot of coaches out there that don't really understand the difference between coaching, teaching, and berating a kid. I would never want a kid to feel bad about making a mistake. I want them to play free. You want all kids to play free. And, when you hamstring a kid like that, number one, they're afraid to make a mistake. And they're also afraid of you. And I would never want a kid to be afraid of me as a coach. And I think that's been something that I can probably say is the most proud of that I'm as a coach, is these kids know that I love them, mm-hmm. and that I want what's best for them. As far as I probably got off topic there, as far as the question and, what you were looking for, the things that I say, I don't know that I can actually think about them. The things that I say end up just being something that happens. You know what I mean? I don't really think about it when I say it. But I'm not allowed to say a few of the things. There's no way I could say them. I'd be afraid that my mother would see this podcast, and because she already got on to me one time when she heard me saying a curse word on the field, and I don't want to ever have to have that happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, but I thought maybe there was what is it, like a dollar tripping over a dime, or I just figured there was a saying in there somewhere that you're like, geez, man, can't we get it right? We look like XYZ or whatever. Yeah. I love trying.
Some of them today might be considered racist. Back then there was, people didn't get their feelings hurt back then like they do now. So that's probably one reason why some of the things I can't say.
That's true. You got to evolve with the time, I guess, right? You become more of an effective coach anyway, because, you're a dad. I'm a dad. You understand really early on that they'll listen to you more if it's at a normal volume.
Yeah, that's right.
The elevated volume just causes them to tune out most of the time.
Well, and kids, you have to treat every kid differently.
Sure.
You've got some kids that can handle being fussed at and yelled at. And then you've got some kids that you have to kind of bring them along a little bit softer. I coached girls softball at youth girls softball. And some of those girls cried on me. And mm-hmm. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have that happen. So I kind of changed the way that I was coaching with some of those kids. Now, my daughter she can handle it. She's been around it, and she knows kind of the way that I am, and she also knows that I love her. My son can handle it, but there's even my son at the point of going into college, there's coaches that can push it too far. You know what I mean? They can push it too far, and they need to understand that there is a line that you don't want to cross with some kids. And that's one thing that I've learned is not every kid can handle it. They all kind of need to be treated individually.
Yeah. Yeah, you sometimes have several dozen, 50, 60 different personalities that you have to learn and kind of tailor yourself to. What you're trying to do is ultimately make an impact on a life, right? And that leads me to my next question for you is, when you think back to your time at Marshall, who was it that had the biggest impact on your life?
Jim Donnan, obviously, Coach Gale, being that he recruited me there, but Coach Gale changed. He was a different guy as a recruiter as he was as a opposite side of the ball coach. He was a pretty intense guy. But Coach Donnan was like a dad away from home for me in the beginning. I never really felt homesick because I felt at home, and I was blessed with, like I said, with good teammates that are now incredible friends. Coach Donnan was the guy, though, in the very beginning that kind of kept my spirits up, when you have moments when you might be down or whatever. And that's kind of unique for a head coach. We still communicate a lot to this day, and he's been a huge support for me from the very, very beginning. Tim Nunez was our offensive line coach that came there in 1995 or 96 spring into 97 into the rest of the time with Coach Pruitt. He then left and went to Texas and was the offensive line coach at Texas. But Coach Nunez was a teacher who was a great offensive line coach. And that's one thing I probably do a lot of what he does. I like to explain the why of when we're doing something. I think it makes more sense to people instead of just telling them what to do, telling them why we do it. I think there's a greater level of understanding that happens when that goes on. We had young coaches my freshman year. Brian Dowler was one of our coaches. Greg Adkins was one of our young coaches. We had some incredible coaches who were incredible people. Scott Reese was our strength coach. Jim Durning was a graduate assistant strength coach. All these guys are just huge influences on my life and were mentors and really good people that kind of helped bring you along. We had Phil that was there in my first year that was a huge influence on me personally. And, then you go into Leon Perry, who was a running backs coach. We had Ernie Pernsley, who was there in 95, 96, 97, and I think until 99. Just some incredible people. Coach Pruitt came in, and it was a shock for us as seniors, especially. I'm not speaking for everybody, but for me, it was a shock when Coach Donnan left. I never would have thought that our coaches would leave. I didn't even know that they could leave. You know what I mean? It was just a different time. I was very naive as a young person, but we needed it. It was a wake up call for some of us. I'd kind of gotten into cruise control a little bit, and you're going into your senior year, and now all of a sudden we've got Larry Keck, who's ripping our tails every time we don't do something full speed. We needed that. I needed him to do that, and it made us better as a team. I mean, we were going to be very, very good. But then you plug in a guy like Randy Moss, and it makes you just go through the roof as far as the ability of the team was concerned. But we had guys on that football team that were absolutely incredible football players who were great people. And coaching staff, Miss Edna Justice, she was part of our program. She was part of our football program. She may have just been the quote unquote secretary, but she was way more than that. She was a mother figure to some of us. And, you've got her, you've got some of our film people, Brad Helton and Tara, his wife, were huge impacts on us. And, it's funny, I'm wearing the shirt. We're having this golf tournament tomorrow for the Foxtrot. But Mrs. Fox was one of the people that kind of helped a lot of our guys graduate. I mean, she motivated us to do well in school. So Coaches were great, but we had so much support off the field that was what made it so special. You know, we needed this. Some of our guys came in as Prop 48 athletes and end up graduating, end up going on, and some of those guys are teachers now. You know what I mean? So it's not where you start, it's how you finish. And a lot of these people kind of helped us along the way. And you know, Brian Fox is the tournament's named after him, and it's tomorrow's our 21st year of this tournament. And I think it's now the largest private endowment at Marshall University, and they provide scholarships to student athletes. And you know, Mrs. Fox was part of that. You know, her husband, and you know, they're just huge people, huge support people for our lives. And I'm blessed to have known them in the 90s and to continue on with the relationship that we have with that family still today.
Man, I can tell that this I don't even know what to call it, right? This Marshall thing is just important to you because you know in great detail all of these people, and you have not like allowed these folks to escape your consciousness because of how impactful they were. And I talk to folks sometimes and they may not be able to remember all the coaches on the staff, but you're telling me not only coaches, but multiple years worth of coaches, players, behind the scenes folks, film stuff, secretary. Like I can tell that this is exponentially more impactful to you than most people. And I think as a Herd fan, that's a level of appreciation that I've not encountered before, right? Because I can only reach a certain level of appreciation for the Herd because I'm a fan, right? And I love them and I want to see them do well. And I feel tied to the program because I'm an alum and all that kind of stuff. But this is a level that I'll be honest with you, I didn't know it existed, you know, and this is really cool to hear so much about the level of appreciation and just sharing these folks and a little bit of their stories with me and with everybody else. Man, that's just so freaking awesome. I got to tell you that's blowing me away. This last couple of minutes, this is blowing me away. I can't get out of here without running down the impressive resume of accomplishments, and then you got to sum it up for me, right? Because I don't know how I can sum it up, but just stick with me here. It's a laundry list. And if I miss something, please be sure and tell me, hey, you kind of missed that one too, homie. So we talked about you claiming the starting offensive guard spot as a freshman in 1993, fresh off of the heels of a national championship, mind you. Then it's a storybook career, right? All conference selection, 1993 as a freshman, second team all SoCon. Then 3 straight years of first team all conference, sophomore, junior, and senior years, 94, 95, 96. Add to that in 1996, the Jacobs Blocking Award, which is the Southern Conference's top offensive lineman. Go ahead and also tack on a national championship to the 1996 accolades. Also an All-American in 1996, conference championships in 1994 and 1996, 3 straight national championship game appearances. And well, not 3 national championship game appearances, 93, 95, and 96, 1 aforementioned national championship. Maybe one of the 2 coolest stats, overall record 50-9 while you were at Marshall, and 56 consecutive starts. If I'm a guy, that's the one I want to hang my hat on right there, because I know I showed up for my dudes every day. And then to cap it all off, Marshall Hall of Fame class of 2007. And oh, by the way, pitched and played first base for the Herd baseball team. And I had no idea that you punted a little bit and long snapped. That's so wild. So did I miss anything, first off?
Well, I wasn't a very good baseball player in college. I can guarantee you that. You know, by comparison to some of the guys I played with in college baseball, I wasn't very good. But I did play a couple years, and I, you know, I love baseball. I missed playing baseball. But no, you didn't miss anything. I appreciate you you having all those stats. You know, that painting behind me that was given to me by Eric Jones, who was a soccer player at Marshall, and now he's an artist in New York City. And we're really close and really good friends. And he did that painting for me off of a picture that I had on Facebook. And he got that for me whenever after I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And it has all those stats on there. He wrote them all out, and it's just an incredible painting, incredibly talented young guy. And it's just the wrap up for my time here, and for this this time that we've had to talk. Everybody knows that I love Marshall. They do. My kids, you know, my children grew up Marshall fans. My mom and dad love Marshall. My sisters, my brother, everybody loves Marshall. And the reason I think they do is because my experience here was such a positive one, and I think I want everybody to have that experience, whether it's at Marshall or wherever it is. I want you to have the same amount of enjoyment out of the time when you're a young person and you're growing into an adult and you're trying to make your way. I love it. I love everything about it. I love still going back into the facility building and going to the alumni events and seeing people and talking about the good old days and talking about the days that we have, the struggles, the positive stuff. I mean, my wife and I went to that Notre Dame game last year, and when we are going to win that ball game, we looked at each other and I said to her, "This is why you make the trip. It's a lot of effort." You know what I mean? And college is a lot of effort. But when you put as much into it as I feel like I did, I put a lot of time and energy, but I put a lot of myself into it too. I think that's one of the mistakes that young people make is they don't want to put themselves out there in a vulnerable position. And they may not want to go and meet someone and have to have a conversation that's brand new with a new person. But I'm in sales. You know, if you're going to be in sales, you're going to have uncomfortable conversations with people that you don't know. And sometimes, you know, for us, for me at least, my experience was always positive when I would meet fans in the community and go and speak at different schools in the area whenever I was a kid and whenever I was in college. And I even got to go to a writing camp for children with autism. And that was something that we look forward to every single week, going out there. And all you would do is just kind of escort a child that's on a horse, and they would be given instructions to the horse. And you're just kind of there experiencing it. But it gives you an appreciation for where you are, you know, because it could be so much harder. Life could be so much harder. And, you know, I've been blessed with great friends, with an incredible family, and, you know, just a support system that is second to none. You know, and I hope that the people that I talk about today, and there's a lot of people that I didn't mention.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of the guys that I feel like I should mention, because that offensive line that we had in 1996 was, in my opinion, the best offensive line that's ever been at Marshall. You know, and we all felt like every single one of us should have been all conference. We only gave up 2 sacks the whole season. And, you know, I feel very, very proud to know that Mike Webb, one of my roommates in college, one of my best friends to this day, Buck Manning, who was the largest human I've ever seen in my life, Jamie Wilson, you know, one of my best friends to this day. You know, what's funny is Jamie and I were not super close whenever we were playing ball together. We sat beside each other in the locker room. We roomed together on the road, but we were not super close. Our relationship has gotten so great over the last 25 years. And it's all due to the fact that we went through the struggle together, you know. But I mentioned Brian Reed. I mentioned John Wade. We had guys like Mike Williams on that team, just absolutely great football players who were incredible people. And that is why I love it and Marshall so much. You know, we were super blessed. We had Eric Kretzer come in, and he only played 1 year for Marshall, but he named his son Marshall. You know what I mean? The guy comes back to Huntington and saves the dude's life at a Starbucks. You know what I mean? That guy is just an absolute maniac. I love it. You know, so, but I love everything about this university. I love the camaraderie that the fans have and the close relationship that the fans have with the players. And that's what I want to see more of. I want to see more of the fans being at these events that we have. We had an incredible spring event this last year. The cornhole event was awesome. It was really, really cool to have the opportunity to mingle around with people out there on that field. And that is the kind of stuff that we need to have more of. And that's what I love about this current staff. Coach Huff and staff have done an incredible job of bringing back the community. I think Coach Spears has done an incredible job of bringing in talented coaches. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how the baseball field looks. I'm really excited about that because I know guys in the 80s that said before they left they were going to have a field. I was told in '93 that before I left we would have a field, and so now fast forward and they're finally getting stuff done, and it's a great time to be a Marshall fan. It's a great time to be part of this community. And like I said the other day, I posted something on Twitter. I want our Marshall University chapter of the alumni to be the biggest chapter, and it should be. It only makes sense for it to be great, and we need it to be great. And we need more financial support. This NIL stuff is a pain in the ass, but it's a necessary evil now. We've got to be able to put money into these funds, into these like pools of money, so we can have kids come here that we may not be able to get otherwise. If we want to take that next step up.
Yep, I understand. We're trying to do our part. We're always encouraging folks to buy those season tickets, donate to the Big Green, donate to the Thunder Trust if you can. Show up to the games. Just be there, right? Be present. And I gotta mention also, yeah, the cornhole event was so cool, man. Like the bowling event was always a neat idea, but this cornhole thing really just opened it up for a lot more people, I feel like. And we felt so blessed that they contacted us and said, hey, would you guys like to broadcast from the event? And we were like, yeah, absolutely we would. So we set up a table, and there we were. You guys were out there throwing bags and having a great time, and we would pull people over to the table. And, you know, we had Girardi Mercer telling stories and Dan Darricott telling stories, and John Grace is fooling with us around at the table, and Darius Watts sits down and has a good, I mean, that's what it's all about, man. And
did you see me and Josh Seamster beat Chad and his team? Did you see us win against him?
I did not. No.
That's all I really remember is beating him and him being so angry. That made me so happy.
So hopefully if this event continues to grow, we can continue that relationship and be able to stream from there again, because those guys that we were talking to were having a great time. They were reliving some stories and times much like we're doing here, but the atmosphere was much more vibrant because we were outdoors and it was an event, and that was just gold. I mean, that stuff's up on our YouTube channel. Those interviews with Chad and Girardi and Darius, and those guys were just beaming. It was just a great event. So I'm with you. I want
Tyler
more
Ferris
of that.
Really heads up a lot of those things that we do.
He killed that.
And he and Taylor, I mean, Taylor Hickman, she works her tail off for our reunions and stuff. And I think it just, they go a little bit underappreciated. And, you know, Teddy Klumpler, he's always involved. You know, that's the thing it's going to take, is for us to continue to push these programs and push these events. And the events are fun. You know, when you allow people to come in and just sit there and people enjoyed watching it, you know, it's a bunch of people throwing cornhole bags, but it's way more than that. It was way more. This event was way more than that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they got, you know, your average fan got to see these all-time greats that they may have not seen in a decade or more. Yeah. You know, I mean, Max Yates out there looking like he could still throw on a uniform and lay the lumber. I mean, goodness gracious. Yeah, he looked like he'd never stopped playing. I mean, it was all inspiring. But let me tell you what I picked up earlier from when you were talking about wanting folks to find their, you know, their place. And what came into my mind was, you said you found Marshall, but I thought, man, if Marshall's not for you, then find your Marshall. And that was so poignant. We want you to find Marshall first of all. But if that's not where you're at, go find your Marshall and live your best freaking life from the age of 18 to 22. Because, man, it's more formative than you believe. And I joked earlier that school got in the way of college. I think I learned more outside of the classroom than I did in the classroom about myself and what I could do in life. It's just so important. Look, I'm going to let you out of here. Don't take off on me right immediately, but I usually turn the mic over to you and let you say whatever you want to say to whoever you want to say it to, and then I'll close it out.
All right. Well, you know, what am I going to say to the young athletes at Marshall, student athletes? Embrace the suck part of it. Embrace all the moments that are trying. Embrace all the moments that you feel you can't get through, because you can get through it. Embrace the moments of being proud. Embrace the moments of being sad. I want kids who are struggling to know that they have someone to reach out to. Everybody has somebody, right? I think a lot of these kids think that they're on this island by themselves, and they're really not. And the struggle they're having right now is probably the same kind of struggle that we had back in the day. But the difference is we didn't have the pressure of social media and other people kind of taking an eye and taking a shot at us. Like, I'm sure people said bad things about us when we got beat by Happy State, but we never heard it. There were things that I'm sure were in the paper. We never saw it. We always had the next play mentality. And that's kind of what I want kids to have. I don't want you to dwell on the negative. I want you to focus on the positive. And when you have that negative event happen in your life, forget about it. You know, I had a coach in high school that said, Fido, forget it and drive on. And I remember that to this day. You know, you just kind of have to move on. Don't make the same mistake twice. Focus on what happened, figure out what happened, and don't let it happen again. You know, I like I said before, and I've said it many times, I'm very blessed to be in the life that I'm in. I have an incredible support system, and I want these student athletes to know that if they need something, I'll be there for them. You know, and I told them during the mentoring event we had a couple weeks, about a month and a half ago, I told those guys that, and some of them have taken me seriously. They've reached out, and I appreciate that. Some of them haven't, and that's okay too. You know, I don't want to put somebody where they're uncomfortable, but I want these student athletes to know that if they need something and I can be that support system for them, I'll do it. And I think our coaches at this university know that as well. You know, I've always let them know that if there's somebody that's that's struggling with something, whatever it is, if they feel like I can help them, that I'll be more than happy to help. That's one of the things that I know that I am in my life. I'm a problem solver, and sometimes people don't need me to solve their problems; they just need me to listen. And if that's what you want out of me, that's what I'll be. If you want me to help you solve a problem, then I'll solve the problem. But I just want these kids to know that I'll be there for them if they need me to be there for them.
Yeah, I can fully appreciate that. I think there's so much pressure to think that you have to forge your own path and do it yourself. And those that realize nobody does anything alone earlier are going to come out ahead faster. So take Aaron up on his offer, right? If you need a word, if you need an ear, a shoulder, whatever you need, take him up on that. I feel the same way, right? I'm just a guy behind the mic with headphones on, but if somebody's like, man, I like that guy's vibe, hit me in the DMs, tell me what you got going on. We'll talk about it. It's cool.
Absolutely.
Right? It's cool, man. I'm a helper by nature. I just am. I mean, it's almost to a fault. I just love to help, right? So I can't thank you enough for sitting down and spending probably far more time than you wanted to spend with me today. But I am so uber appreciative, man. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Well, listen, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be part of this. I've watched several of your podcasts and I enjoy them. And, you know, I'm all about promoting the herd. I'm all about this community. And I think that what you guys are doing is a great thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We certainly are having the time of our lives. We feel like two of the luckiest guys within the Herd fan base. And because I get to also do this show, I feel like the single most luckiest fan in the entire Herd fan base. But check it out, guys. I am KD Hudnall. That is Hall of Famer Aaron Ferguson. And this is Inside the Thunder. I'll check you next time. Later.